Given the option between spending hundreds or thousands of dollars between headphones, IEMs, amps, and DACs, where would you put your money? DACs and amps are recycled every few months. Companies like Topping and SMSL have an ever-growing list of products with older gear buried in history or landfills. So, when we see a unique product, it tends to shake things up. Hifiman hopes to grab attention with their recent release of the EF-400. This is an R2R DAC with an amp section. It was originally released at $600, but currently can be found for around $500. Apos Audio loaned me the EF-400 to review. As you know, Apos is among a few online retailers that specializes in hi-fi gear. If you're looking for your latest audiophile fix, check out Apos Audio. Now, on to the EF-400. We rarely see DAC companies make grand statements about their gear. Topping, SMSL, SCHIT, RME, and even the venerable Rupert Neve Designs do not claim that their DACs have a sound signature. Hifiman, however, seems to take a slightly different approach. They say that the EF-400 adopts tech from their Himalaya DAC, which is an R2R Bluetooth DAC module for select Hifiman headphones. Hifiman promises that the EF-400 has, quote, sonics that outperform products many times its size. The EF-400 has balanced topography, which leads to a balanced headphone section output. Hifiman says that the EF-400 has all the connections you will ever need. There's quarter-inch, 3.5mm, 4.4mm balanced, and balanced XLR headphone outputs. On the back, the product has balanced XLR outputs for your amp, along with single-ended RCA output, and it also has USB-C and USB-B inputs. Unfortunately, the EF-400 does not have Bluetooth connection, and this seems like an odd omission considering Hifiman dropped the DAC from the Himalaya Bluetooth module into this chassis. The EF-400 is heavy and built entirely of metal. It is approximately the same size as the Matrix Audio Mini I DAC amps, but a bit larger than the Topping EX5. The operating panel is dead simple. The left-hand knob acts as the gain and sampling selector. You can choose from high gain non-oversampling, high gain oversampling, low oversampling, and low non-oversampling. The placement of these options means that if you want to do some tests between oversampling and non-oversampling, you easily can, and I appreciate this little feature. The right-hand knob controls volume. Both knobs are machined and turn smoothly. Unfortunately, the EF-400's volume knob is not properly tuned. There is noticeable channel imbalance at all gains and sampling options. This imbalance occurs from 0 to about 10 degrees, then settles into audibly properly matched. It is somewhat telling when a DAC and amp manufacturer refuses to provide thorough measurements. Hifiman chooses not to disclose the measured performance of the EF-400. I could not find any measurements from ASR, but I did find some measurements from L7audiolab.com, which is a Chinese website dedicated to audio gear. Headphones.com also provides measurements. If you're interested in getting some measurements, I suggest going there. As with my other DAC and amp reviews, I used a repeatable and specific testing methodology while reviewing the EF-400. I broke this up into several phases. In Phase 1, I used the EF-400 for several weeks as my go-to desktop unit. I connected it to my Mac and PC. I used various headphones, both dynamic and planar, which included headphones that have low impedance along with those with high impedance. The purpose here was to determine if the EF-400 presented any odd behavior, connection problems, or otherwise stood out to me in any obvious way. In Phase 2, I compared the EF-400 DAC amp against some alternatives. This includes the Topping EX5, Matrix Mini I Pro 3, and the Mytek Brooklyn DAC Plus. The goal was to determine whether in either NOS or OS mode, the EF-400 obviously sounded different. The EX5, Mini i3, and Mytek products are all neutral, flat, transparent, so this gives a good baseline test. I used Voice Meter Banana on my PC and multi-output device configuration on my Mac. This way, I sent signal to 2 DACs at once. I then used a passive AB switch from the headphone output sections of each device. I used various headphones to listen, including the Austrian Audio Hi-X55, Sennheiser HD800S, Audeze LCD2 Classic, Avatone Planar, and the Focal Utopia. In Phase 3, I compared the EF-400's DAC output against the output of the EX5, Mini i3, Brooklyn DAC Plus, and the SMSO SU9N. I plugged all these products into the Gustard H16, which is a neutral transparent amplifier. I used a passive AB switch utilizing the XLR outputs for each DAC tested. Finally, in Phase 4, I tried to determine if the EF-400 struggled to drive any of my headphones. I used a variety of headphones including the Modhouse Argon and the Beyerdynamic T1 2nd Gen. I strongly encourage people to conduct these types of true volume-matched A/B tests at home. For about $25, you can find the necessary off-the-shelf components to create your own test bench. If you want less reviewer and fanboy BS, I think you need to establish a reliable, repeatable testing method that mitigates against audiophile nonsense. With the testing setup complete, let's just get into the results. In Phase 1, I used the EF-400 as one of my go-to devices for several weeks. Throughout that time, I never encountered any significant issues. My computers immediately recognized the device as a Hifiman DAC. The knobs remained smooth to turn and were responsive throughout the entire testing period. All the headphones' output jacks worked perfectly fine. The one issue that was a little bit annoying is the volume mismatch. This channel imbalance for the first 10 degrees of the volume knob can be aggravating to work with, especially if you are using low impedance, sensitive headphones or IEMs. Even on low gain, the EF-400 drives very efficient headphones or IEMs quite well, which means that by the time the EF-400 reaches balanced channels, your volume might already be beyond your comfort level. I could mitigate against this problem by changing volume on the system volume or simply adjusting volume from within my playback software, so it's not necessarily a deal breaker. But it speaks, well, volumes of Hifiman. Yet again, we have another Hifiman product that demonstrates quality control problems. It is aggravating, and every time a Hifiman fan says that the company has solved its QC issues, Hifiman shows otherwise. But except for this issue, the EF-400 did not exhibit anything unusual, either good or bad. Some people will claim that a revelatory experience occurred with them with this DAC. I, on the other hand, don't find that remotely to be the case here. In Phase 2, I compared the EF-400 against some alternative options. Volume matching is key. This can be a little bit tricky, especially with a wonky potentiometer, but I was able to get volumes perceptibly matched. Using my typical lossless testing playlist, along with a wide assortment of lossy content, I really could not tell much, if any, real obvious difference. This was true whether I used NOS or OS on the EF-400. There were elusive occasions when I thought that the EF-400 might have had a slightly softer, gentler, less harsh sound than any of the comparative products, and I thought this was intriguing, which prompted me to try another randomly selected track, then try to listen for the alterations again. Often this perceived softer sound from the EF-400 disappeared as soon as I changed volumes marginally on either the EF-400 or one of the comparative DAC amps. Ultimately, maybe there is a slight difference between the EF-400 and the other DAC amps, but it is so very slight that it may not be noticeable depending on your music, volume, headphones, and whether you're even paying strict attention. In Phase 3, I connected the DAC output sections to the Gustard H16. As with the previous test, this one ended with a similar sensation. There might be a very, very marginal difference. That perception of softer, less harsh sound from the EF-400 sometimes manifested itself, but when I adjusted volume to be a bit different from the comparative DACs, well, that sensation basically went away. Finally, in Phase 4, I tested the EF-400 with a variety of headphones to figure out if it struggled to drive my gear. And the short answer is no. If in high gain mode, the EF-400 had no issues powering even the Modhouse Argon. This means that the planar headphones from Audeze, Sivka, Avantone, Hifiman, Monolith, and others will receive plentiful power, especially through balanced. And I would not worry at all with dynamic drivers, as they are generally very easy to drive anyway. Before we leave this section, we should touch on the oversampling versus non-oversampling issue. This is a much debated audiophile problem. Well, perceived problem, or just debate. Some people claim that the R2R DACs sound amazing, and that either oversampling sounds better or that the alternative, non-oversampling, is overall better for accurate reproduction. Frankly, I'm a little bit tired of the whole nonsense. Increasing the resolution of audio should be done with the original track, not with the DAC section. Taking a compressed and lossy MP3 file, then trying to oversample it will not gain you anything other than maybe potentially noise and distortion. Similarly, if you have a lossless file in 24-bit 96 kHz or higher, what exactly are you trying to oversample and why? What's the goal? That lossless, high-resolution PCM file we paid money for isn't all that good? Moreover, isn't the point of being an audiophile to enjoy music and support artists? If we find good music that personally speaks to us, isn't that more meaningful than R2R topography and oversampling or non-oversampling? Well, that's part of all the arguing in any respect. Audioholics has a concise explanation of all this stuff on their website, so if you're interested, check that out. Ultimately, for me, oversampling and non-oversampling don't make a material difference. And going back and forth between the two on the EF-400, there is no smack-you-in-the-face change. On the one hand, Hifiman does offer something unique with the EF-400. Here you get an R2R DAC with a powerful headphone section with plentiful single-ended and balanced options. You can switch between oversampled and purest non-oversampled mode to your heart's content, and the device is simple to operate. On the other hand, the EF-400 does have at least one issue, which is the volume potentiometer. It may not be a big deal for some, but others might not be so happy spending $600 for a device that exhibits this issue. I think it's a little bit odd that Hifiman chose not to include Bluetooth, considering the pedigree they are marketing is from a Bluetooth module. The EF-400 is a reasonably competent device. It's not the cheapest way to get into R2R territory, as you can find dongle DACs with R2R design for about $300. But as far as I know, the EF-400 is the only desktop device that offers what it has for its price. So that in itself might be a huge factor. But if you are not tantalized by the R2R arguments and instead just want something with features, then I don't think the EF-400 really is worth it. There are cheaper options, not R2R, that offer at least as much in connections, and some do more. There are other options out there, more costly of course, that could be more enticing for different reasons. The Wu Audio WA7, Jolita Glass FX2 DAC, RME ADI2, Matrix Mini I Pro 3, all these products are great with their respective strengths, and all are frankly unique. Fundamentally, I think the EF-400 is a fine product. If you can forgive the channel imbalance and really want to try an R2R desktop DAC, then the EF-400 may be worth looking into.